to the meet and greet with the potentially new town manager, Mr. Herbert. At this time, I would like to open the Board of Selectmen's meeting for the 12th, for January 12th, 2016. And with that, if you would all rise, please, so we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everybody coming out on an evening that assures that you would all like to be home in a nice warm house and watching the snow from the inside of the comforts of your home instead of being out here in the community building. So thank you very much for being here. This is an integral meeting, very important meeting tonight for us and for the town. We're going to make some sort of a decision tonight with respect to the path that this town is looking forward to go into. Hopefully, it will continue in the path that former town manager Tony Schiavi has brought us to, and I know that it is my feeling that Michael will continue that journey down the same path. So we look forward to that. So at this time, I would like to open up the floor to any residents that have any questions to Mr. Herbert. There is a microphone right here. It's available for you, so if there's anybody here that has any questions or even comments they would like to make, you're more than welcome. There's no rhyme or reason as to who. I'm not going to pick or stare down anybody like who's going to ask questions or whatever. So if anybody would be willing to come up, this is your time to ask questions to Michael.
You really don't want me to start talking, I promise. We'll be here for a while.
Let's not all rush up at one time. I knew, Joe. I knew.
Real quick.
It was, real quick. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You
By
didn't do this.
more than
you. Didn't
you.
do this. I only have a few small questions.
Okay. First question. I have been talking at great length in many meetings about my concerns about residential growth in the town. We need commercial growth. And it's my view, and I've had numerous conversations with Mr. Herbert, congratulations about this, by the way.
Thank you.
About the challenges that residential growth poses to the town, both fiscally and with regard to sustainability issues of water, traffic, quality of life, and so on. So that's my question. Could you talk a little bit about your philosophy and what you think how do you see what the town has been doing historically about addressing this issue and what you feel is possible going forward?
Okay. Thanks, Joel. Well, first of all, I do want to say thank you to the board and thank you to the entire community for coming out here and giving me an opportunity to discuss this question and other questions and really hopefully give you an overview of my credentials and vision, if you will, for the town. And that's a great question, Joel, because right now Ashland's at a critical point where we're facing a lot of current and actually potential future growth pressures, residential growth pressures. When I started here in 2013, the housing, there weren't any housing units in the pipeline. There were not any, developments currently online or in the permitting process. Now there are over 800. So in the span of 2 years, we have added or potentially adding 10% to our housing stock. I want to first address commercial growth because I think there's been a misnomer out there, and I really think it's we need to spend time and correct it. Commercial growth is not going to be the antidote to residential taxes in this town. It is not equipped. It is not set up. It will not be zoned. It cannot really be zoned to make that kind of a difference. So while commercial growth is important, and I can elaborate a little bit more on my philosophies for economic development and business development, I kind of want to get that out of the way. So residential growth, it's something that we're constantly talking about. It's something that we're constantly being faced with. Whether it's affordable housing, market rate housing, there always seems to be some project, some development that is in our midst, if you will. I'm not necessarily opposed to growth. I think growth and change happens. I think, that is inevitable, and that's just the cycle of life, if you will. Where I do think we need to do a much better job is controlling that growth and really not be dictated to where we're going to put certain developments, where we're going to, make certain, build 140 units, et cetera. We need to take more control and take more action in basically shaping our own destiny. That's really what it comes down to. And you got to do that through a myriad of ways. You've got to use that through carrot approaches, if you will. You got to use stick approaches sometimes, if that's available to you. But I've always found that, if you engage with developers early on in the process and figure out what makes them work and what they have to realize, you could kind of come to some agreements that would be, beneficial for both the town, both parties, if you will. So does that answer your question?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. One last question. This has to do with the MWRA. I've been fairly supportive. I've had some concerns about it, and I know, there's pros and cons. It's not all one side or the other here.
Right.
And I do think that from a sustainability point, we need a second source of water. However, since writing all of my thoughts about this to the Water Policy Committee,
Right.
I have developed a lot of new concerns about the MWRA, and I'd like to hear your reaction to it. So I just hit you with a few buzz.
Sure.
This is all out of the newspaper. I'd be happy to provide the sources. It says here, the 60% of the budget this year, the MWRA budget, will go toward debt. So the point of the article was that's very substantial. Part of that was from the $3.8 billion Boston Harbor cleanup they did. Massachusetts is projecting a $10.2 billion gap in resources for drinking water over the next 2 decades. $7.7 billion, including $5.6 billion to maintain the transmission and distribution network. And then this was just in the paper, in the Metro West Daily News last week. I'm just going to read this because it sounds scary to me because I know we've been talking about a water treatment plant. So I'll read this one sentence, 2 sentences, sorry. While the town has fully designed plans, this is Framingham they're talking about, to build a water treatment plant, the well project has been delayed by setbacks, and here's the disturbing part, including opposition from the MWRA. So they're not only interfering with the water treatment plant, but the town's ability to build these wells.
Right.
So the concern that I have is are there fiscal concerns, and what does due diligence for Ashland mean if we become members? How much are we indemnified from some of what appear to be some serious issues that they're having? Financing their operations, and what can we do about it
Right.
to protect ourselves if we become members?
Well, from an operational structure, I should say that, so what happens is the MWRA sets its budget and it develops rates based on usage from different communities. And so you do lose a bit of control as a community on what your rates are, right? Because it's a factor of the budget that the MWRA passes. Now, we have representation on that committee. It's made up of a number of different individuals. So just as it relates to the MWRA in general, I support the connection with the MWRA, but I think there needs to be some policies. I think it needs to be part of a holistic, approach to what our water issues are. I think if you connect to the MWRA, it gives you an option. But I think that option should be guarded through whether it's the Board of Selectmen as the Water and Sewer Commissioners, if it's, a citizen board that's being appointed by the Selectmen. I think you have to have some kind of key that decides when and if it's turned on. Now, that being said, again, the MWRA connection is only one piece of a holistic water, plan, if you will. We've got to look at ways to recharge our aquifer, keep the water that we use here in Ashland, because what's happening right now is we're drawing water from a well. using it, and it's getting shipped through Framingham and being treated over at Boston Harbor, and we pay for that. So not only are we paying those expenses, we're actually shipping our water to another community and out into the ocean. So again, I support the MWRA connection. It needs to be guarded. There needs to be some kind of turnkey elements that help the community decide when and if to turn it on, and it needs to be part of a larger plan.
So with regard to this concept of a holistic approach, which is obviously very important, the concern that I'm raising that I wanted you to comment on is the loss of autonomy, specifically that the article is talking about the MWRA essentially trying to interfere in the internal decision-making process in Framingham to prevent them from being able to build a water treatment plant. I guess the question is, might we be better off looking at, if that's a plan that we have, might we be better off trying to do that before we became members of it, where we would control our own destiny?
I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm not sure if you can develop the whole plan before you make that connection, but I think you could develop the skeleton of the plan and certainly identify what your goals and values are and the direction that you're trying to go into. I mean, Framingham gets all of its water from the MWRA. I'm not saying that we would necessarily have to use any MWRA water. I think the connection, it's an option again. So those are my thoughts related to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else in the audience? Come on up.
Have to introduce myself?
If you'd like to.
Sure. My name is Steve Greenberg, a resident here of Ashland. First of all, Michael, thank you for a fine job as our assistant town manager, and I look forward to your success as our town manager. And I think I like to think of the town as a $60-70 million enterprise. And that's a lot of finance, and you've done a wonderful job with that. How do you see that going forward, position-wise? And maybe you could speak a little bit to human resources and what the town's to expect from that.
Sure. So when you're talking about financial position, are you talking about just
Some
the
of
direction?
roles that you played in the past.
Okay. So yes, so as finance director, my role was really to, number one, supervise all the financial departments in town, and number two, establish kind of a goal, if you will, a vision for where our financial, status, what it needed to be, right? So there's a couple of different things that make you fiscally sound. Number one is you have recognized and you have developed a plan to address your long-term liabilities, which some communities, a lot of communities don't do a good job of. But you got to make sure you have a balance there and you don't plan for those and fund those liabilities at the expense of current operations. So that is, that's a real key balance that we've got to try to meet. And I think we've done a great job of it collectively. I think we've, developed joint financial policies that have been signed off by the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, the school committee, that basically agree to the fact that, okay, this is the direction that we're headed. These are the goals that we need to try to realize, and this is how we're going to do it. And if you just look at it from a numerical standpoint, I mean, we've doubled the amount of money in our stabilization fund. Okay, we're almost to our magic number of 10%, and that's where we're going to stay because it makes no sense to go more than 10% of our money being in the general rainy day stabilization fund. We've developed a plan to fund and address our OPEB liability, to at least start it. It's a huge liability, but we have a plan, and that's been recognized by Standard & Poor's and other financial experts. But that being said, we've been able to make unprecedented investments in the community and in departments. So we've been able to put in, funding for the community center, right, through the meals tax. We've been able to add, positions. Kim, being one of them. Sorry to point you out here, Kim, but Kim has just done a remarkable job, and I hear it, from a bunch of different people. Just what she brings to the community center and the activities that she brings here. We've been able to keep the library open. For 7 years, this town was on waivers with the library, meaning we couldn't fund the library at what the state said we needed to fund it at. So we were able to put more money into, the library operations to make that happen. We've done, I think, people, if you've driven around in town, you would realize that we've, made a significant investment in our road work. More paving has been done, I think, than, many years before. And we were able in FY16 to put more money into the school department budget in terms of a year-over-year increase than we ever have before. So we've been able to do all of that while at the same time, again, recognize and address and fund a portion of our long-term liabilities. So I'm really proud of that. Now, I know it can go on, but financially, finance is not necessarily the means to an end, right? If you have a strong financial base, it allows you to make investments in your community that make a community better, okay? So now we're at a place where we can fund things like downtown projects, other projects that really might not necessarily be operational capital, but there's something there that helps us improve as a community, helps us shape our community, and it goes back to what I'm talking about with shaping residential growth and having more control. We are going to, hopefully be able to have more resources that would allow us to do that.
Just as a follow-up, could you address how the finance role that you played as an assistant manager will be taken care of in the near future, and maybe address the human resources?
Sure.
Which is a new thing coming to town. A lot of folks have questions about it. If you don't mind, I'm going to go sit down.
Be my guest, Steve. So we will definitely have a finance director in town, whether that is with the assistant town manager or another position. I've got some ideas and some thoughts about that, and I will probably make them public very shortly. Human resources, that's another thing that we've been able to fund that this town has desperately needed. As the assistant, I wore 3 different hats. I wore the assistant town manager hat, I wore the finance director hat, and I wore the human resources director hat. Unfortunately, what would happen if one of those hats needed to fall off, it would inevitably be the human resources one. So the ability to fund and attract some decent candidates for this human resources director position and establish a department, I think is going to help this town in so many different ways. It's going to help us basically deal with, employee issues before they fester and become bigger issues. Like some departments have had problems, a lot of personnel problems in the past. A human resources department would hopefully, be able to intercept those, issues before they become overblown. So, you're welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else in the audience that has any questions for Michael? Good evening.
My name's Kate Jerzik, 11 Rodman Road. What would you do when conflicts arise with the legislative body, which is town meeting, and your bosses, which is the board of selectmen? I guess a recent example of this conflict would be the project at Robert Hill Way, that town meeting voted not to move forward with the project, and town leadership has been operating, doing presenting resources that way.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Wow. That's one of those where, man, I wonder what questions I could be asked. That wasn't one of them. So, I think once you take the project out of it being the project that it is, and if you look at the goals that we're trying to achieve overall, I think that could help everybody develop a much better understanding of where all parties are coming from along this. Ultimately, the Board of Selectmen are my boss. And the Board of Selectmen, I've been around long enough to see different boards, different city councils. One person changes and the whole dynamic of the board changes. And some boards want you to take, as a town manager, they want you to take more control and take more of a leadership role and drive the bus a little bit more. And then some basically step forward and say, hey, we are the policy making body. We're going to spend a lot of time developing policy and shaping the direction. And at that point, my role is to really go to the board and say, okay, here are your options, or here are some options. Here are the pros, here are the cons. and, help them decide and then go implement that. But at that point, that's when it goes to town meeting, and town meeting as a legislative body gets to vote and decide whether or not they want to move forward with something. I mean, I can say that the Board of Selectmen have not done anything illegal. They have not done anything that was not within their purview. It's something that they have decided to do. The town meeting vote I think you're referring to certainly set some strict guidelines, but they were operating within those guidelines.
I don't know, let's take turns because I thought about this a lot and I have a lot of questions. You can tell me.
Go right ahead.
I think this will be an easy one.
Okay.
I've often heard statements such as town managers have a shelf life as an explanation of the turnover, perhaps even a philosophy that we want turnover. I don't think Ashland has specifically driven that, but maybe that's behind some of the thinking. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on this.
Well, it is a hazard of the job, and unfortunately, I talked earlier about boards changing and, the makeup of boards changing. And once that happens and there's a different dynamic, if the board doesn't feel like the town manager or their town administrator can, basically act, upon their authority and act in their best interests, then it's certainly within their purview to move forward and find somebody who could do that. It doesn't necessarily mean the manager or the administrator have done something wrong. I will say, when I came here to town, several years ago, I really fell in love with the town. I really envisioned myself being here for many years, and I'm proud of everything that we've accomplished, and I've certainly been involved in the financial piece, but again, that financial piece was really dedicated to providing us a solid foundation from which we can develop a community or continue to develop our community moving forward. I can tell you that my goal and my career goal as I stand here is to help this town come up with a strategic plan for where it wants to be in the next 20 to 25 years and then spend that time implementing it. And I can't imagine any community development professional that would think that that's not the most awesome thing in the world. To basically spend their lifetime, helping a town develop, realize its identity, embrace its identity, embrace its heritage, while looking to the future and deciding what it wants to be, and then helping it achieve that. And you'll see different types of managers. There's a lot of different managers that get into it because they like to manage organizations and the complexity of it. I never got into this business to do that. I got into it to develop communities, not develop organizations. So it's my...
What changes would you make to the public town meeting warrant? And I guess some specifics just from different people and ideas that I think would be extremely helpful is publishing and making it available earlier so residents have time to really discuss and educate themselves on the issue. And I know that Tony had started the town manager pre-form, and sometimes I think everybody, maybe be honest, successful or not a week before, but it's better than, but we don't actually get the real meat of that time to digest. And then I think another idea that I would strongly suggest at least be considered, but I want to hear what you think is in the warrant requiring a pro and con section of the articles, and like this is our statewide ballot question, there's other towns that do this, and I think it would try to, first of all, root out unintended consequences of the people that are very passionate about it. And I don't think anyone in this town is passionate about something that doesn't have some good ideas, and I don't think there's anything malicious, but there are, I think, unintended consequences, and maybe if that group that was first proposing it had to put some thinking caps of cons, we might, and it would also just start the discussion at more education and more, and I feel like that we haven't given up that value. That is the reason for town meeting, to have thoughtful discussion and real decisions, not to try to slide things through.
Right.
Or at least I hope we don't continue going that direction.
So, town meeting, it can be, a very interesting event in any town. I think Tony, I think we did a good job of improving the process that we inherited when we came here. Again, we tried to get the, town meeting warrant out. I believe we tried to get it out at least 2 weeks before town meeting, which I don't think that was ever a goal beforehand. And then, Tony wanted to do the forums to talk about the issues and answer questions. Doesn't mean we can't get better and improve that process. So I don't have any specifics related to that right now, but I would certainly be open to it. A pro-con, type of section. I'm not sure if legally you could put that in the warrant, but you could certainly use that as, some supplementary information, just kind of like our budget book is. That's another thing. I mean, the budget is the biggest policy decision a town can make. It's not just numbers. It reflects values. It reflects where the town wants to go. And what we put a lot of effort in the budget to make it transparent, to help people see where the dollars were going, why they were going there, what was going to happen, and we tried to get that out 2 weeks ahead of time as well. I mean, my understanding was beforehand, people would show up at town meeting, they would get the sheet, that would be the first time they saw it. I'm not sure if that's the case, but we're moving in the right direction. I guess what I can say is I would commit to continuing that direction.
So we talk about when developments come up, we've had discussions of having an impact study, and unfortunately, I think we've seen projects that are maybe going forward without really a full understanding, but we set that as a goal to understand the impacts of particular development on, like, public services, roads, traffic, schools, fire, police, and so that's, I think, common understanding agreement as a goal, the impact study. But what I'm wondering is what's the plan to mitigate the impacts when we get that information?
Well, that's part of a negotiation process, certainly. First, you do have to develop and assess what the impacts are before you can develop any kind of, fair, if you will, mitigation. We, unfortunately, with regards to development, we have to operate within a certain legal, statutory structure. So what we need to have is we need to have the best information possible to determine, okay, is this going to increase children in the schools? Is this going to, increase calls for public safety? I mean, the new assisted living facility at 126, it's great business for town, great community asset, but it is generating a lot of calls for our fire personnel. We weren't able to assess what would happen formally, I guess you could say. So the Board of Selectmen have really been focused on, having a tool developed that would allow us to, assess the impacts, both on public services, schools, financially, of these small or medium and large commercial and residential developments. And we've really been focused on it, almost like a dog, if you will, to the point where, I'm still bringing it up at the planning board meeting for the rail transit district and making sure that what the developer has, promised us is what he is intending to give us. There's a little bit of straying over on one side. It's like, no, you got to push them back and say, okay, no, this is what you promised, this is what we want, and this is what we're going to get. I think showing a developer or showing any kind of potential investor in the town that you're serious about, again, seeing how their development both positively and negatively are going to impact the town, and do everything you can to fight to mitigate those impacts. I think just doing that and fighting sends a strong message. So.
So we recently created the new position for economic development, and I'm wondering how you're going to measure the success of that expense so we can decide if it's a position worthwhile to fund.
It's a good question. So let's me talk about economic development a little bit more. Again, I don't think economic development and building our commercial base is going to solve some of our residential tax problems. I've made that point before. But I do think businesses, as community partners, are very, very critical for the health and sustainability of a community. So how would, Beth, who is our new Economic Development Director, how is she going to see that she's doing a good job? Well, in the first year, it's really based on, output type measures, if you will. How many businesses are you contacting? How many phone calls are you making? Have you developed a process, an intake process, so that when people, when businesses inquire about working in town, that, that information gets in front of you. So a lot of her first year goals are going to be focused on that. Eventually we can start looking at, a couple of other different performance measures. My background is in performance measurement, so it's, I like to think of things as KPMs and KPIs, key performance indicators. At that point, I think we could look at, how much of our tax base is made up of commercial versus residential. Again, I don't think it's going to be the silver bullet. But I think that's a good indicator to see, if we're doing a good job. The amount of investment, the amount of jobs that's brought into town is certainly one. Amount of jobs that are paying at a certain level, a living wage. I think that's important. And then, how much businesses can invest in a community. So, one of the things I would really like to do is help both the 126 corridor and downtown develop their business improvement district, which is a private thing. It's a private enterprise. And, even though you can't necessarily numerically quantify whether or not you're doing a good job based with, a certain area of town developing a business improvement district, just the fact that one would exist or one would be created, I think would be a good sign that we're moving in the right direction.
Affordable housing, is meeting the mandated goal, 10% of our housing stock affordable, your responsibility? And if so, what measures we implement to have actually meet the goal?
So, that's another good question. So, I wouldn't say it's the town manager's responsibility. It's the town's responsibility because a number of different things have to happen to make that a reality. And a lot of that requires town meeting approval. I will say I think we missed the boat and missed some opportunities in the last couple of years to really make a dent in that 10% number that we needed to have. I think we could have, if we could go back to the rail transit district and look at perhaps making 25% of those units affordable, that would have allowed us to basically consider all 400 units as part of our affordable housing inventory. And, I think we probably would have been close, if not have actually reached our 10% threshold at that point. And, there were some strategies and some ways that we could have done that. But that's not the direction we ended up taking. I think we have to do things like inclusionary zoning, where if a large development is being proposed, you have to set aside a certain amount to be affordable. I think that will help us get towards that goal. I think if the town owns properties where we think affordable housing is appropriate, finding the right developer to do enough of a large-scale project to help us, get to that 10% level would be an option. But ultimately, the town really needs to decide if is that what it's going to try to do? Does it want to meet its 10% criteria? Because right now we're just kind of skipping along, and we're going to hover around the 3.5, 4.5% range. But we need to, if we wanted to get to that 10% range, we need to make a concerted effort, and it needs to be a goal that we put forth resources, money, to make happen.
I'm going to a quick follow-up to that.
Sure.
So how do we get that town answer? I mean, is that the Board of Selectmen? Do we have to put that as a referendum on the town meeting? Do we get 20 people to tell you in a letter we want that? I mean, I don't know, because I feel like that is a value of Ashland, affordable housing. We have affordable housing trusts, we have money, we have CPA funds, it goes to that. So somehow that value isn't moving forward, or it really isn't a value and I'm crazy, and that's a possibility. But that's what I'd like to find out. Can we get to that next step to make that commitment?
Well, and I would say that probably would be certainly part of my responsibility, is to help the community come to some kind of consensus as to what it wants. Right now, it's, we get, it's almost like the directions that we get are sometimes contradictory. And I think it's important for us to, you're never going to get total 100% consensus, but I think, if you have enough people, if you have enough critical mass pushing for a certain policy objective, then inevitably that change happens, right? And so, to the best of my ability, what I would help to do is try to, basically bring together those people, help realize that kind of consensus in, whatever form I could, whether it's a strategic plan, whether it's, revising our affordable housing plan. There's a number of different vehicles that we can take to do that. But right now, we just haven't got, a clear message as to which direction we need to get in.
Thank you, Kate. Mike, you need to take a break?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, good. We weren't going to give you a break anyway, but
Didn't think you would.
Roberta?
I appreciate, Michael, all of the work that you've done, and just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
With regard to the commercial development not being the panacea for the problems that we have regarding residential development, everybody talks about a structural budget deficit year after year after year. What are some of your ideas or thoughts in a way to address that? Because you had talked about, looking at long-term tax liabilities, budget liabilities, and while this technically isn't like OPEB, it still is a problem that pops up every year, and we're silly not to try to address it in some way. So I was wondering if you had some ideas about how to address a structural tax deficit that we've come to expect.
Sure. So, and, a structural deficit, it can become complicated, but really all it means is that you're spending more than you're bringing in, okay? And that's evidenced by the fact that, until 2016, we have had to go to our rainy day stabilization fund each year to help balance our operating budget. So now through the policies, again, that the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and the Finance Committee have agreed upon, that's not going to happen unless there are certain, and I don't want to say catastrophic, but certain negative economic indicators that cause us to need to take that money out. So that's at least eliminated that. So now what we have to do is we have to either reduce spending or reduce the rate of spending that meets the current revenue structure, or find ways to increase revenues. And unfortunately, in Massachusetts, we're very limited in how we can increase revenues. We have the opportunity to basically go up 2.5% plus new growth on our tax base. With the state, we're pretty much dependent upon what they give us. Where we really have an opportunity to control our own destiny, if you will, is with things that's called local receipts, which are fees, building permits, fines, etc. And so we can always look at ways to, to enhance those or change those or shift those to where we can balance a budget. But on the expense side, we're always going to be finding ways to try to save money when we can, whether it's energy efficiency, savings projects, which have the dual benefit of financial savings plus helping the environment. One that was done that we talk about a lot, just because it was significant on a number of different levels, is changing employee health insurance. That has helped us significantly. And I don't want to bring the override into it right now, but I think one of the reasons people feel a little bit more compelled to at least talk about an override is they've seen that we've taken all of these measures to save money, and yet we're still in an issue where we have a small structural deficit, plus we have the opportunity to maybe restore things that were cut during the economic recession.
Just one quick follow-up comment that I don't know if you want to address it afterwards, say something afterwards, but I appreciate all of those efforts, especially the cost-cutting measures, and I think that you and Tony, when he was here, did a great job tackling those. But it seems like other towns and other municipalities are able to control their residential growth better than we are. And that residential growth always costs more than you bring in taxes from a development. So do you see any way for Ashland to do that, or has the boat sailed and we're out of luck?
I'm not sure if the boat sailed. Other than, and Carl and I had this conversation very early when I came here, barring, buying up all the open and developable property in town, there's really no surefire way to stop, stop development from happening. But I think again, what we can do a better job of is getting in front of certain developments and finding a way to basically shape them to where it would have the least impact on us. We did that with 466 Chestnut Street. Selby Nat and I were able to kind of develop this process where we would bring in different developers who would basically pitch projects and different concepts, and we selected the best one. We fortunately had a very, very willing landowner who was willing to go through that process, and we should be very thankful for it. But other than things like that, proactive things that we can do, we really have very few tools, I think, to use to basically stop any kind of residential growth or control any residential growth. What we would have to do is walk the line and maybe push the envelope on a few things, maybe have a different interpretation of certain laws that, we currently hold right now. But I think all of those are on the table.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Roberta. Anyone else that's sitting in the audience have any additional questions they would like to ask Michael or comments? I know briefly, Michael. Oh, sure, Judy. Hi. Hey, Judy.
One, I apologize, I came a little late, so
It's okay.
I don't duplicate the question, although I suspect they're probably not. I actually only had one question, and I wear those readers too, so I actually typed something large in case.
Oh, very good.
Okay.
She looked at me, oh boy.
But there was one thing that came to mind when you answered one of the questions. You had commented that you work for the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen, like most other committees and groups in this town, change. I mean, change every year. Your vote can change every year. And one of the first things I was going to say to you is thank you for doing what you're doing, because I think all of us, whether we volunteer or we're employees, when you work for a public organization, it is really on, you're serving the citizens of
Right.
that town or that entity. And I wanted to thank you for that, because I think that takes a certain something in a person.
Thanks.
But this question actually links to it. So I was wondering if you could expand on that. You work for the Board of Selectmen, because when I think of whether it's you or anyone else who's employed in the town, and you could say that, any of those employees that would you would hire fire and would respond to you would be working for you.
Correct.
So I was wondering, in that light of that citizen piece, if you could expand a little bit on that, how you see that interplay.
So just a general overview of the way Ashland's local government works. So Ashland's legislative body is town meeting. So typically anything that requires legislative approval has to go to town meeting. Appropriation of funds, zoning changes, etc. The Board of Selectmen actually act as the chief executive officers of the community. Now, the selectmen in different communities delegate a certain amount of authority to their town manager or town administrator or a similar position. And so that person typically becomes the chief administrative officer. So again, as you touched upon, my responsibility are basically all of the operational things that happen in town. If the Board of Selectmen has a policy that they want enacted, I work with the staff to basically develop the best way to enact that policy and enforce that policy and promulgate that policy. When citizens get involved, That can always be kind of touchy, because sometimes it makes selectmen feel uncomfortable if, citizens are coming directly to them because they know the operational authority resides in the town manager's position. Some selectmen don't have an issue with that. I'm probably middle of the road. But I will say that I try to be open to every citizen and every citizen's complaint. And if you do have issues, you contact me, directly, and I try to handle them.
Well, I'm assuming when you say issues, you're speaking to the citizens. Because
Correct, citizen
that's
issues.
Really what that question was about was responding to citizens. Because the other thing that you had commented was long-term planning, thinking about the
Correct.
town in terms of 25 years. Well, if it was my household, I would be thinking about what is the best interest of the citizens, and then having that in my mind well, I don't want to tell you my opinion, but that was my question, was really how does that interplay in terms of that? And I can go to my second question if you like.
Well, let me just touch upon that, because I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think part of my job is to listen to citizens as well and communicate those concerns and issues to the Board of Selectmen, who can help develop, solutions to that. At the end of the day, if the Board of Selectmen, which this Board of Selectmen would never do, ask me to do something that's illegal or immoral, I'll just say immoral, and really goes against, my values as a community person, then yeah, I probably would not do it. And, at that point, we have a decision to make in our relationship. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Well, I think like everyone else, I just asked a question looking
Sure.
for your thoughts and ideas, and I'm sure everyone, hears that.
Okay.
It's fine. So the other thing I actually did write down, because I wanted to remember, and it's been a really long day. So as with most of us who are volunteers for boards and committees, my question actually refers to something specific, in that during the last 7 months as a member of the Board of Health, I've really been surprised because, and I actually started counting after 10 people did this, but 42 people have said approximately the same thing to me. And what I've been told by these people, some version of their belief, that the system's rigged, that it's really an insider's game, that it's those people who basically, are a small group, that many of those people have special interests. And this is what I've been told, and I started counting people, and given half of those live in one neighborhood, but there are other people, and I go to different events, and I hear the same things because they approach me as someone relatively new participating. And the thought is that, development is king, heck with the little guy. So my concerns are for those people, for those citizens, because, I'm hearing it from a lot of people, and for their health, safety, and happiness. So what I'm asking you is, how would you respond if you heard if you hear or heard those same things, or how would you respond with that? Because I really don't have a specific response. Actually, at the beginning, I was saying, oh no, come to the meeting, speak your mind, tell the person, or call the person, or make some contact. But I can tell that there are no shows. So I was wondering if you could comment.
So sure, certainly if there is a developer or somebody doing work within town that is breaking a current bylaw or ordinance, if you will, or state law, we certainly have an obligation as a community to send the appropriate enforcing authority out there and do an investigation. If they find that something has been done, certainly take action within their power to rectify that and make sure that it's corrected. So that's the whole statutory. Let's just put that on the legal end. There's also, I think, a community and a moral end, if you will, and some things become more civil matters. And then what role does government play in basically getting involved in civil matters? Well, I can tell you, I would probably look at maybe, again, facilitating some kind of conversation, if you will, right? And maybe finding some kind of compromise, some kind of common ground between the parties that might be aggrieved. So again, it's not necessarily within the legal realm, which is pretty black and white, but there are all these gray areas as well. So that's how I would address those.
You know, one of the things I didn't add at the beginning is that, I see the outreach, whether it's for people to come out and vote or whether it's to serve on committees. We always have vacancies. And it's not just a specific grievance, but it's just an attitude of why even try, why even come out and just be on that committee. So that was, I guess, the context with
Okay.
which I was speaking specifically. But that's all I have.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Judy. Anyone else that would like to ask any questions or even comment? And when I opened up this meeting, I actually put the cart before the horse. And I should have asked Michael to give us a little bio. And I didn't do that. So first of all, I apologize for everybody here. So Michael, this is an easy one.
Okay. My bio?
Yep.
It's an easy one, but it's not a short one.
Well, can you do it now?
Maybe you can consult with Joel on making it short.
So yeah, just briefly, I grew up in the state of Tennessee, went to school there, came up here to go to Berklee College of Music in 1999. Left Berklee College of Music, became involved in the community college system in Massachusetts, and that's really where I got involved in public service and learning about things like the legislature and laws and bureaucracy. And how those things worked. And at the time, my girlfriend and wife, eventually, we were living in the town of Winthrop, and I started becoming more involved in Winthrop issues and Winthrop politics, if you will. And really kind of more of a community development type of role. And so I started going to meetings, just as you would go to town meetings like this. Started getting involved that way. Became a member of my town's finance committee. And I really got to see, how local issues have the most profound effect on people, compared to state issues, compared to federal issues. And then I also saw, on the flip side of the coin, how much impact people in local government could have on the daily lives of their constituents or the citizens who live in their community. So that's why I wanted to go into local government. I went to the University of Massachusetts Boston because they had a program in community planning. So I've got my undergrad degree in community planning. I wanted to be a planner. I don't know if you could tell just from my talking, but I really thought I was going to go towards the planning element. Actually went to graduate school at UMass and at the McCormick School to get my MPA. Did my thesis on the redevelopment of the city of Newburyport. Then I got a job at the Collins Center, which was a think tank, a think and do tank is what we classified ourselves at UMass. And then that's when, I hit the wall and realized, well, planning's great, but if it's the managers who really decide what happens. So I took a job in the city of Lowell as a performance management analyst. The city manager hired me there to basically start this new performance management program, and that's how I started getting involved in that aspect of my background. And along the way, I became, really just kind of a troubleshooter when we had a misappropriation of funds in a certain department. That's theft. I was sent to the department to kind of do the investigation and run it, and while, the parking director was going through his legal issues at the time, it was the parking department, cash business. When we had some issues in HR, I went down there as the assistant HR director and, learned that. The whole time I was working with our CFO and learning about money, and that's when I was like, oh, it's really not the managers who have the most influence on this stuff, it's the money people. So that's what got me more into the financial aspect. So from there, I left. I thought it was the best training ground any person in local government could have. From there, I went to the city of Newton, worked for the mayor there as his director of performance management, was also involved with the budget process. And that's when I saw the job in Ashland open up. And I knew John Petrin, I knew Mark Purple, I knew the situation that was happening. So, I saw that opening had become available, and I saw that the town had hired this really, unique type of town manager, somebody who had no municipal experience, but somebody who, has certainly been in leadership roles for the majority of his working career, his military career, and somebody who came here to hit the ground running and fix a few issues and really had a vision. And I really wanted to get in on the ground floor there. So. At that point, I guess you could say the rest is history. You pretty much know my activities, my background here. I do a lot of the financial stuff. If I'm speaking, it's usually related to finance, and everybody goes to sleep, including me. But, I think if one of the things I really want to impress upon people is I'm not just the finance guy. I've had a lot of responsibility related to things outside of finance. Again, with community development, with human resources, with IT, with just operations. Again, working with, our new IT department to, a consolidated IT department that is saving us money and also delivering us much better service. So, kudos to Paul. And regionalization initiatives, things like that. So that's really my professional background. My personal background, I'm married to my wonderful wife, Beth, who is just a great person and a great partner. And we have a wonderful daughter who many of you know, Nora. She can be seen at many community events. And now my mom's gotten into the act. So my mom volunteers here at the community center 3 days a week. So yeah, I think we definitely feel like we're invested in the community and a part of the community.
Thank you, Michael. At this juncture, I'd like to take a 10-minute recess. So if we need to stretch our legs and do whatever else has to be done, we'll adjourn back at 7:20. Thank you and welcome back. At this segment, I am going to ask Michael that we're going to ask questions from the board at this time. I don't know, Michael, if you want to stand there or if you want to sit down in front of us, behind us, probably.
I can stand here. How about I just twist this? And
Are you afraid?
No, I just like to know.
He's taking a defensive position over there. I was a little concerned. We don't bite. We only nibble.
I know. I've sat next to you for 2 years, Joe.
Okay. I'll start from my left, and we'll go to my right. So, Rob, you're up, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to note that Joe put together we sent him all our questions, and he had to put them all together, and then I'm going to take one out of order. I did want to, of course.
Well, no one's going to know the difference.
Yeah, right. All right. So, I just wanted to follow up with some of what I thought were pretty interesting questions about policy development, really between the town manager and the Board of Selectmen. So I think that's a special issue to me, and I liked how you responded so far. I want to say, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, that we are the policy setting, us in town meeting, the policy setting body. So. I think I wonder if you could just, and I think, at least in my personal observation, a lot of citizens have a little bit of a misperception about the town manager. The town manager is primarily an operational manager. That's how I see the role. And the policy is enacted by the citizens of Ashland through town meeting and the Board of Selectmen. So I just wanted to emphasize that, and at least that's how I see my role here. And so I just wanted to ask Mike if you could just maybe elaborate a little bit about the process of policy development with the Board of Selectmen and a little bit about implementation. And you have already discussed it a bit somewhat, but just just a little more development and anything maybe we didn't get into before, because I think that's one of the key key processes here in town is like, what are the policies? For example, Katie was asking about housing development. Well, we just approved a housing development plan and had a lot of discussion about it. And so, that's the kind of thing as we get into these various policies and questions, how do you see approaching that?
So, I will say, Rob, like probably the trickiest part of this job in any community is basically taking the amalgamation of different ideas from the 5 board members, or if it's a 3-member board of selectmen, a 3-member board, and basically coming to one conclusion as to what they would like to see in terms of the town manager's role in shaping policy or implementing policy, right? I think, again, if I have a pretty clear direction from the board, a pretty clear sense as to where you want to go as a unit, if you will, I would probably feel comfortable acting autonomously on behalf of the board, if you will, and making sure that you're updated. On the other hand, I think there's some things that have happened in the last couple of years, some really big projects that it might have been better suited to have the Board of Selectmen engaged earlier in the process, maybe at a few different decision points. So let's just say with the Rail Transit District, as we're going through the development agreement, and I don't want to knock the way it was done before, but with the Rail Transit District, once we got to a certain point and there were different decisions that needed to be made, I probably would have come to the board and said, okay, here are the 3 options. Here are the pros and the cons. Which way do you want to go? I personally think you should go this way, but ultimately it's a board decision. You make that decision, I take that information, and I move on until the next point. And I think then you get a better shaped policy. So those are really kind of the 2 extremes. If I feel like I do have a clear direction from you, I will act autonomously and do that. But I think I'm aware enough of when you want to be involved in the process as a board that I can take that to you and let you know, okay, here are the decision points we need to make. There's going to be a couple of things that are going to come up, probably in the next couple of agendas that are going to be similar to that.
Okay.
So I hope that answers it.
All right, thank you. My second question?
Follow-up, go ahead.
Okay. So I ask my second question?
Sure, go right ahead.
This is kind of more of a general conceptual question as well. I think it's really, how do you see your relationship with the other major public manager in town and who has overseen 70% of the budget, and that, of course, is the superintendent of schools. So if you want to just talk about, in the past, and I'm talking about the distant past, there's been some mistrust, and it's been a little rocky, but I think, from what I've seen recently, it's a good relationship, but I don't know if you just want to expand on that a little bit and how you see that working.
No, it's good. I think I have a good relationship with Jim. I think I have a good relationship with Barbara. With Jim, I think he and I have very similar visions for what the school department should be and could be. Resources aside, I think, they're very similar goals. That is the key, I think, to making any type of business relationship work, where you have 2 very different interest groups, if you will, being represented. I think he is open to compromise. I think that was exhibited during the budget process for 2016. Jim's one of those guys, and Barbara's the same way as well. Where when we've had some issues during budget time, and that's usually when all of these things come to a head, I can sit down with them and say, okay, what is this, what are you trying to get to? What are you trying to accomplish? And maybe there's different ways to get there. Good example is the Special Education Stabilization Fund. The school department wanted a budget request driven in large part by those out-of-district special ed costs, which they couldn't really quantify that early in the year. So that's when I presented, the idea, hey, what if we set aside this Special Education Stabilization Fund? So the money has to be accounted for special education. So it's going to be available, it's going to be reserved, but it's not necessarily going to be spent for other things. If you just put it in their budget, it could be spent on other things. Jim, I think, understands the necessity and the importance of transparency, and I think he's making strides towards that. So I feel like I've got a great relationship with him. He stopped by the other day, asked me if I would co-sign a letter that he wrote. asking for support for certain policies. I felt certainly comfortable signing that, and we can do that. I think you will probably see a lot more joint statements, if you will, moving forward from the both of us than maybe before.
All right, thank you.
Yolanda.
Okay. I'm just going to ask my first question, then I'll ask my second question later on. So what will your approach be as Ashland Town Manager? Do you consider yourself a hands-on? Do you delegate? Do you micromanage? Or do you use mixed? And as part of that, how will you include communication and transparency to the community and the public?
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of questions.
I sort of mushed two together.
That was a good
but
one.
I figure you can handle it.
This is the big league.
I can handle it. So, just as it relates to, transparency, openness, obviously there are things that are personnel related that we certainly can't discuss and make it out in the open. And it could be big personnel issues. It could just be a small disciplinary issue. That's not anything that everybody needs to know about. But policy development, policy, changes, operational changes, proposed policies, we need to find a better way to get that communicated to the public and have an opportunity to get some feedback. One of the ways is going to be the website, our new improved website. I think we need to use social media better. We struggle each time we go and have an event. Do we do the Blackboard Connect, thing? Do we do the Carl's favorite message board downtown? Do we put something on there? Do we, put something on the website? And because inevitably, we do all of that and somebody complains and says, it's too much. But if you don't do that, people complain and say, well, it wasn't enough. To me, the people complaining about it being too much, it's a matter of convenience. The ones who are concerned that we're not using as many methods and vehicles to get the information out, that's an issue with communication. And so what was your first, that really answered your second question.
That was the second part of it. What will your approach be as our town manager?
To just management?
How you manage, hands-on, things like that.
So I try to be a mentor. I try to be a coach. My general operational management philosophy is to establish a set of goals and objectives for the organization, then help each of the department heads set goals and objectives and a vision for their departments, make sure that they're congruent with the overall goals and objectives, and then give them the resources they need and remove any barriers that impede them achieving those goals and objectives. That's really kind of my main, I see as my main role. It's coach, it's mentor, if you will. It can be, but it's also advocate, believe it or not. And I have an open door policy, which takes a lot of time, but that's fine. I think that helps build relationships. Because we're a team, and ultimately you could say we're a family. We're not, there's not a lot of fat in our staff, and we really depend upon each other. Delegation, I'm just going to let you know, I'm going to need to work on that. I'm like control of things, and Beth's laughing over here, but that's something that I'm going to be responsible for a lot more things, and to take care of all of those responsibilities. Some of the things that I've done before, like the budget, somebody else is going to have to take a much more active role. That hurts me, but, it's true.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you want to do your second question?
Yeah, actually, it rolls into my next questions, actually. So you are currently our numbers person. You understand the budget, you know how to manipulate the numbers, determine how, different scenarios are going to affect our bottom line. How will you transition from the numbers person into more of the big picture person as the full-time town manager?
So this is interesting because I think anybody in the office, and even some of some of you as selectmen know that numbers really aren't my strongest suit. I am the big picture guy. One of the reasons Tony and I worked so well in the person I'm going to have to find to replace me is going to have the skill set that Tony brought to the table, which is operations, management, clicking, making sure all the boxes are ticked off. I am much more big picture, thinking of things as a chess match, thinking several different moves ahead. How does this affect this? It might not be evident, but there could be some kind of connection. Somebody once described to me, kind of mine and Tony's relationship in military terms, and it's like, okay, if you have 3 hills and you need to take one, you want Mike to be the guy who picks the hill. You want Tony to be the one that leads the charge and leads the guys up there to take it. And I think that really summarized what our working relationship and the way things are. But the ideas and the concepts, those are generally mine. It's the detail stuff, things like that I need to find somebody who can help me with.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Stephen.
So my question, Michael, is I guess asking you to respond to, I think, some common themes that came up with the public's questions this evening, relative to residential growth, relative to impact studies and mitigation, affordable housing, so on. And it goes to how you see your role potentially in terms of assisting both the Board of Selectmen and the town in terms of a vision. The Board of Selectmen just went through a process where we developed a mission and a vision statement. That was ours. That was 5 people in a room that came to a consensus. How do you envision assisting us doing that on a town level, and so that we I guess, minimize our weaknesses and maximize our strengths as a community?
So in terms of specific vehicles that we do that, I probably need to have a little bit more thought and some little more dialogue to see what would work. But let me just say, in general, I think the number one goal of mine is going to be to help the town come to some kind of consensus as a town as to what it wants to be, whether through a strategic planning process, a visioning process, a comprehensive plan process. Not what it wants to be now, but what it needs to be and what it wants to be in 20 years. You're going to hear me say this a lot, and I'm just going to forewarn you because it's critical. A lot of the issues that we're facing now are a culmination of the decisions or indecisions or actions or lack of actions that we've taken as a community the previous 20, 25 years. To know where you have to know where you want to go before you start developing an action plan to get there. So, that being said, it wouldn't be my vision of what the town would be. What I would try to do is facilitate conversations amongst the community, structured conversations, because if they become too open, you really don't get a lot done, and that's just the fact of life. But structured conversations to help the town come to some kind of consensus on things like housing, economic development, and then translate that into some action steps that we can then, implement throughout, the next 20 years. I am a firm believer in writing your goals down. My life is an example of it. The ability to, basically set goals and objectives for yourself, write them down, get them on paper. That sends a powerful message to yourself. It's a commitment to yourself, and it might seem trite, but again, I'm speaking from personal experience. Where I am today is because I followed that process, and it's amazing. I mean, I could look at goals that I've set for myself back in 2006, and say, okay, well, how am I doing? Well, I'm where I wanted to be. Might have taken a different path, but I'm there. And so we need to do that as a community.
Thank you. And I'll ask my second question as well, which is one of your major responsibilities as town manager will be to negotiate contracts. Elaborate on your background, your experience, your style of negotiation.
So my style is, well, let me back up. In terms of background, I've been a part of many negotiating teams in the municipalities I've worked in. Not only just different individual collective bargaining agreements, but when you look at doing something like moving to the GIC or changing health insurance, you need to bargain with a much larger committee made up of representatives. What I try to do is find the win-win situations. Anytime you go into bargaining, you've got to go in with the win-win situation. Unfortunately, what happens is people get into those tables, or sitting on the tables, or sitting at the tables, I should say, and they get into this mindset, well, if you win, I lose. And that's not the way it has to be. Good example is the GIC, and I know there's still a lot of angst about it because it was a very painful process. It's changed. But what we brought to the table is, okay, we knew that there were going to be X amount of savings for the town, but we knew there was going to be this tremendous impact on the employees. So what we tried to do is basically shift how much of the premium that we would pay and take a little bit more of that on, and also set up mitigation funds for certain catastrophic events. So you've got a situation where, the savings aren't as much, but we've come to a good compromise. And I also think, just in general, you have to get to the heart of the concern. What is driving a collective bargaining union's issue that's on the table? Because once you get to the heart of the matter, whether it's security, whether it's, and a lot of it's security, then you can maybe find a different way around it that you never really thought of before. So it's about being creative. It's about being open. It's about compromise. And, we've got 2 contracts settled right now. A third one is imminent. And, the fourth one, I think we're going to try to hit the reset button on and start over again and kind of see if we can approach it from a different angle.
Great. Thank you.
Carl? Michael, you and I have spoken many times about community building, so I'm going to talk a little bit before I ask my question. Sure. And just make a couple of comments based on what people have said tonight and based on some of the things that we've spoken about and based on something that you just mentioned and that Steve mentioned. And it has to do with community building and how what is important in community building. From my perspective, community building is kind of an organic thing. It's hard to stand up before a podium and say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And it's almost something that you either get or you don't get. But I think it's based in listening. And we have done a lot of talking tonight about who answers to who and who is whose boss and where are those lines drawn. I think it's more important to find out where those bridges are built, not where the lines are drawn, with regard to the Board of Selectmen and the Town Manager and the other boards and committees. But the people that seem to be oftentimes left out in these discussions are the residents of Ashland that are not on the Board of Selectmen, but elect the Board of Selectmen and elect the planning board and some of these other boards, and feel, I think, sometimes alienated. One of the things that I find attractive about you, and this is something that I think that you did long before you became a candidate for this, is you've become immersed in the community, and you've mentioned some of it. Steve mentioned the vision statement that the Board of Selectmen put together. From my perspective, the vision, so it wasn't 5 people that locked themselves in a room and came up with a plan and said, this is the plan. At least from my perspective, and I think it probably is the same for my fellow board members, is it came from listening, living in Ashland for a long time, listening to a lot of people, and coming out that the vision statement is not rocket science. It's what you said. It's finally taking all of these ideas and all of these suggestions and putting them in compartments to say, let's do this and let's do this and let's do this and let's have something to base our decisions on. I am what's the word I'm looking for? I'm appreciative of the fact that you've become so immersed in the community, and I think that you have that tool and that that instinct to engage with not just the Board of Selectmen, but with everyone. And I think that you seem to be a good listener, and I hope that you will continue to be. My question is, after all this long-winded diatribe, is what do you see as the most important issue facing Ashland now and going forward, and how do you think that you would address that?
Well, I hope it doesn't sound trite or as a skateboard away from the answer, but I really think the lack of some kind of planning document, something a little bit more detailed than the vision statement, that really has the input of a number of different, constituencies within town. The lack of that kind of direction really puts us really behind the 8 ball with anything we do, with anything that's proposed. And, I think that's, again, the critical thing that I would, address in my first couple of years would be to help assemble that plan. It's not going to be my plan again, but I think a lot of work's been done. The Comprehensive Plan Committee's done a ton of work. We've got Affordable Housing Plan has done. Granted, I think we all have some issues with that document, but there's a lot of work associated with that, open space and recreation. How do we take all of that and and amalgamate those into an action plan for the future, and really a set of concrete values and goals that when a policy decision comes before us, we can look to that and say, okay, well, this doesn't really fall into where we want to go. So how can the other party get to where it is that we want to go? And again, I feel like we just sometimes fly blind. I think a lot of times policies are developed in a vacuum, not necessarily saying that they're done on purpose. And what happens is you go out to implement those policies and people start saying, hey, wait, this isn't what I wanted to do. And so nothing gets done. That's what happens. Nothing gets done. So that's how I would address it. I would be much more of a facilitator. And my leadership style is much more collaborative. It's bringing different parties together. I think one of my strengths is identifying when 2 or more people need to have a discussion about something and bringing those 2 people together on neutral terms, and having that discussion and having, a good outcome.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, we are in the process of reviewing our town charter. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on if you were a resident of Ashland instead of a prospective town manager of Ashland, what changes you would like to see?
Well, that can only be done through this charter review process, or just in general. That could be done through maybe a home rule petition or something of that nature.
Either one.
Okay. So, I think in general, some of the there's pros and cons to having elected boards. We're facing an issue right now with one board where we're having a hard time, even though they're elected, right now a joint board needs to take place between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Assessors to appoint a replacement. And right now we can't do that. We can. I found out there's some ways that we can do it, but for a while we didn't think that we could do that. So I think the ability to just make an appointment as opposed to go through the electoral process has some benefits to it. It also allows you to make sure that you can identify and hopefully put on some of these boards and committees people that have the expertise that you're looking for. But then again, there's the con of of not having direct participation from the electorate, just making those decisions as to who's on that board. I can tell you, just in general, I'm much more fond of a I guess you could say, a city form of government where you have the legislative body, being served as by a council, a town council, and then, whether it's a mayor or a city manager acting as the CEO. I think you can get just as much public input in that, because right now, I really think town meeting is not necessarily representative of the people in the town of Ashland. A lot of people here, and the people that are my age, of our demographic that we know, are leaving at the crack of dawn to go to work in Boston, rushing home, hopefully getting their kid before the child care center closes, getting home, doing dinner, things like that, and just really kind of getting by. They don't have time to participate. I think they would have the opportunity to maybe find people who could participate and who could participate for them as their proxies on a council. And then the other benefit of that, I think, is the efficiency. There are things that require legislative approval right now that we have to wait until we have a town meeting for. And with the council, you're usually meeting every couple of weeks. So that being said, I don't think this community wants that right now. So we'll work with what we have. But I think the number one goal is to make sure that we're really giving everybody an opportunity to participate that needs to participate, and that decisions are being made and carried out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. I do have a follow-up question with respect to Kyle's question with respect to the charter review. And being on the charter review, we were discussing, and I brought this up to you a while back, about the strong town manager's position. And other towns around us do not have a strong town manager. And you can see some of the shortfalls with respect to that. So I'm assuming that your answer to this question is probably going to be no. So you're more in favor of continuing the strong town manager's position than going to the non?
Yes,
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because that helps you do the things that you need to do.
It helps keep things clear. I think it helps bring clarity to the staff who are the ones out there doing the work day to day. I think it helps stratify accountability. I think there's a lot less tendency to pass the buck when the town manager holds the buck, if you will. And it's tough to ask any administrative professional to meet goals and objectives when he or she doesn't necessarily have the tools in terms of personnel and the authority over those personnel to make it happen.
In listening to what the folks out in the audience had relayed, asked questions with respect to you, I guess one of my questions would be, in addition to everything that they brought up this evening, is that there seems to be some type of disconnect between committees within the town itself. Sometimes the planning board doesn't know what the zoning board's doing, and vice versa, Concom. So I know that we have an idea of, we have a tech review committee.
Mm-hmm.
But would it be feasible to, and here we go again, I'm thinking of creating another committee, but this is not something I really enjoy doing, but would it be possible to get a member of each of those committees together on maybe a weekly, bi-monthly basis to say, okay, these are the things we're doing, so that everybody is aware of what's going on. So that way, if someone has a concern, they can bring it up. Is that something that you would entertain doing down the road?
I think that's one possibility. I think there are a couple of possibilities. Last year, maybe it was even the year before, I had asked Selby as one of his goals to convene basically a land use group, a land use meeting, to really kind of start talking about different concerns and issues that everybody was kind of facing. Yolanda, I think you were at that one, representing, the Comprehensive Plan Committee. We had the Planning Board, we had the Zoning Board, Open Space. And it was number one, everybody really didn't know where to start because it was so new. But as we went on to that meeting, I think some good things came about. And I think we had some subject matter, that we could have talked about at the next meeting if we had had the next meeting. It kind of dropped. So that's at the committee level. We have a consolidated community development and health department for a reason. They should be talking to each other. I think I was kind of amazed that, I'm hearing issues that are before the Conservation Commission and they're, concurrently, before the ZBA, and there wasn't necessarily, communication between them. I think that's critical, and I think that could have been better handled through better staff resources, if you will. So we've arranged the staff to where every board should have some sort of support, professional support. We've arranged the planning office to where, we no longer have an administrative assistant. We have an assistant planner who can support the ZBA. The planner can support the planning department. We have a conservation agent. It's currently open right now, but what I envision for that conservation agent in the future is to not only support Concom, but also help with open space, if possible. And so that department, and whoever leads that department, needs to be the one that's having the continual conversation and putting in place the guidelines and the checklists and to make sure that everybody's talking to each other.
Would that be a mandate that you would suggest happen? That
Yes.
the individuals that are involved in each one of those committees make sure that they stay in contact with one another so there is that constant flow of communication, so there isn't a disconnect and then things fall through the...
Yes, I would. I mean, so what I did when I started here is I developed the concept of these cluster meetings where, you had community development and I would meet with different department heads and that, or social services, and meet with the different social service people. And that was an opportunity to have a dialogue, but really those shouldn't be the only times that those department heads convene and converse. And that really has to happen with the department head.
Mhm.
So yes, that would be a mandate.
Okay, thank you. My last question, and you briefly touched on it by other answers to other questions that were provided tonight by the citizens, which I'm very thankful for them to come this evening. Your 5 major goals for the town within, what do you see would be the 5 major projects that Ashland should really pursue and follow up, not only to make the town better, but to save money in the long run?
Okay.
In addition to, the override study group that's going on right now, what other projects would be, that you would see to be your 5 top goals to try to
move the town,
Right.
move the town forward? What would be my 5 biggest priorities, if
Right.
you will? So, again, I'm going to reinforce, getting the community together, coming up with a plan. I hope it doesn't sound trite, but I think that is my number 1 goal. There's going to be things that, go underneath that umbrella. Number 1, getting some kind of movement downtown, some kind of an agreement on where we want to go. Do we want to have a town green right in the middle of downtown? Do we want to use Stone Park? Do we want to develop things using this form-based code? Do we want to depress the rails? All of these are questions that are out there and different competing interests. At some point, we've got to sit down and say, okay, this is what the plan is, and this is what we're going to work towards. So downtown is one of those. Route 126 is another. We have a great opportunity to continue to move that program in the TIP process and start having, the public development, public infrastructure development happen within really a short time frame in government terms. But what we need to be doing right now is to start, building up and working with the private side on that corridor to really help complement what's being done in terms of public investment. Because like I've said before, to get things from the poster board to reality, we need private investment, not just public investment. It's continue the financial sustainability that we have, created and start moving forward. Again, not to say that we have a AAA bond rating, which is a goal that I have, but that AAA bond rating allows us to make more investments in the community. That's, it's a vehicle. It's not the end, right? So that's important. And then actually internally, I would say, getting all of our collective bargaining agreements settled. I think that anytime those start hanging out there and go a year in, it becomes a little bit it's a drag on the organization. So that would be that. In terms of cost-saving measures, I think we need to look at regional dispatch. I think there are a couple of other regional opportunities we might have with regards to animal control. We currently have a regional animal control agreement, but perhaps expanded. But I think, you know me well enough to know that if there's a buck to save, I'll probably find it. And I'll continually keep doing that.
Would you be in support of a combined public safety building down the road? I know there's been discussions and we're talking about doing that. Is that something that you would follow up on and hopefully get done within the next 2 or 3 years?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not necessarily sure the land that we've acquired right now is actually suitable for it, but I think there's some opportunities that we can grab some land, whether just for a straight purchase price or through some kind of an agreement that would be much more suited to public safety. One of my ideas was to basically have a joint public safety building connected by a regional emergency dispatch center. And so the thought was the state 911 system gives out a ton of grant money to build these facilities. And so we could potentially, have the state pay for a big chunk of that whole building, which would be great. It's a theory. I don't know if anybody's ever really approached it that way before, but I think they'd be open to it.
Time to try.
Yeah. I am not afraid of trying something and failing.
Thank you. And the last question is, do you have any questions to us? Or for us?
Can we still keep the 10 o'clock rule in effect on Wednesday?
That's the hope.
Okay.
That is our hope.
It's the
That
10
is our
past
hope.
8 rule.
And
we ever reached it?
And Nora's going to have to understand at some point in time,
No.
some people get long-winded.
What I would ask is I know you had your relationship with Tony and kind of the dynamic. What would you like to see out of the town manager board of selectmen relationship? We've talked a lot about what I think about it. What would you like to see?
Me personally, I think the relationship that we currently have, I don't want to see it to change. I want to see it expand. You're always open to us, and you've always provided time for us. I'm the type of individual that I don't like coming in on a day-to-day basis because you have daily operations that need to get done. So, a quick note, phone call, or an email, just to let you know what's going on. If there's anything, just give us a call. And if we can continue that approach with me, that would be fine. I don't know about how the other board members feel, but that's the way I feel. I'm not a micromanager.
I'll jump in as well. You've gotten to know my style. I'm the same thing. If there's something going on that we as a board need to be aware of or need to be taken care of, certainly pick up the phone or email or however, let us know. But I won't be in on a daily basis because, we're setting policy and procedure. We're not there to manage how you do things on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
Or your approach to doing it. And you're gonna have a different style than Tony. You're a different person. You have different things going on in your life. And as I've said to you when we were having conversations about all of this is, as long as you're getting the job done that we need you to get, how you need to get it done, I don't really care how, certainly in an ethical way, but, if you're there at 10 o'clock and you're there till 10 o'clock at night, you don't have to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. You have,
Okay.
I think you need to work in the way that you can get the job done that you need to get done.
Rob, Steve, Kyle, any additional questions?
I guess the only thing I'd, add to that, or just along a similar vein, is just, communication's important, and, the idea of if there's something that's going on or some concept that's taking place, to making sure that everybody knows about it, so you're not surprised, So, and I think we've done, and I like what you said about, developing policy. And, I like the idea of the strategic plan or continuing that whole process. I think, you identifying that as a major goal, I think is very important, because I look at it similarly myself in terms of over the next 5 to 10 years in this town will be kind of the final build out for development. So this kind of having this strategic plan, I think, is a very good way to approach it. And I like, the idea of making sure we have a plan and communicating with people and understanding what's going on. So Thank you for that.
Any closing remark? Any closing statement? Oh,
think
sorry.
Carl
Carl,
has
I'm
to
sorry,
speak
Carl, I
on
didn't
Are
see
you
you.
going to say something?
I was just going to comment that I think we all have our different styles in terms of, how we communicate and what our expectations are for communication as well. So, and I guess I would, agree with Joe. I would hope that if, and I'll use me as an example, that if I overstep a time factor, that you say something. My style is more, I like to sit and talk. I also like to, when something is on my mind, I like to talk about it right then and there. And I know that's not always the most convenient thing to do. So I think we just need to develop as time goes on.
I think my comment, and I might sound like a broken record, Michael, but is to expand on a community conversation, because your relationship to us is very important, but we're not all going to be here all the time. But the community is, and so I think that anything that can be done to expand that, as far as a reciprocal conversation, both listening and explaining, is something that I would like to see both while I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen and after I'm not a member of the Board of Selectmen.
Great.
Any final thoughts?
Sure. So, once again, I can't express to you how appreciative I am for the opportunity to be the interim town manager and potentially the opportunity to be the permanent town manager. And also, thanks again to the community and for coming out, and my wonderful wife, who has been very supportive, and wonderful staff members who really, keep things running. Not just keep things running, they keep things running in a positive direction. When Tony made his announcement, I was kind of shocked. I knew this was probably in his future. I just didn't realize it was going to happen at that point in time. So I immediately went to you and said, I'm happy to serve as the interim town manager. I need to think a little bit about being a candidate for the permanent. And during that time period, I got to do a lot of soul searching, if you will, and reconnaissance as well, because I wanted to see who could potentially fill Tony's shoes, because I've put a lot into this community, as you have, and I didn't want to see somebody come in that would just completely go in the opposite direction. But then I started thinking about it more, and I was like, well, this is the place where I have said for 2 years I would like to finish my career. Again, it's not meant to be trite. But I don't have any desires to go to a larger organization. That's not me. This is as big an organization as I want to be in. Again, for me, it's not about building organizations. It's about building community. And I started thinking about what I could offer. And, at that point in time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to try to do this. And a lot of that is, really, I will say, because of this board. I feel like this board is a lot different than previous boards. I think we spend a lot more time together. I think we have a lot more conversations. I think we have a lot of disagreements. But I think at the end of the day, the decision that comes out is much more representative of the community and something that we can get moved forward. And so that energized me in a way. And knowing not all of you are going to be here, all the time. But I think my style is such that I'm a team builder. I like to build teams within the organization. I would love to help you gel and become a team as a board, and I'd love to help the community gel and become a team as a community. And so I would really enjoy and appreciate the opportunity to be your town manager.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's Board of Selectmen's meeting. I am going to read, because we are going to go into executive session, And by law, I have to read that pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Paragraph 3, to review and discuss strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations related to non-union personnel to conduct collective bargaining sessions and/or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. That's why we're going to executive session, so the motion would be, if you'd like to read that, sir, as a motion?
So the motion is pursuant to General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to review and discuss strategy session in preparation for negotiations related to non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions and/or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. The Board of Selectmen will not reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of our executive session.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Can I ask a question about the motion? Are we then not taking any action at this time in open meeting?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
You can't.
We can't, we have to negotiate first.
You need to do it.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Well,
I just thought we were going to,
So
We're not
before, let's just explore Rob's thoughts, because we certainly can, at this juncture, if we vote to appoint Michael Town Manager, subject to contract negotiations. So that is certainly within our,
that is pure, that's in our purview to do so.
that's right. So
So do I hear a motion?
Before you, I'd like to wait until we do, and, I mean, I think doing it at our regular meeting next week, I think makes much more sense. This is not being broadcast live. I think that has been the possible expectation, that we would be doing this meeting and then making a decision and then making an appointment next week. So I would prefer that we not take a motion and take a vote tonight.
Is there any discussion on that?
You would not take a motion to go into executive session?
No,
or-
we can go, no, we need to go into executive session.
Okay.
I don't want to.
You don't wanna take the vote tonight,
I don't
okay.
think it's appropriate to make that appointment official tonight, personally.
Because it's not on live TV?
Well, it's not on live TV, and I just, yeah, I think it's better to do it at our regular meeting, and
Well, this
by
actually...
that point, we may have some contract negotiations done.
okay, that's fine with me.
That's
fine.
all right, so there's a motion and a second, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so
We
we
do
have a roll call vote.
Atkinson, aye.
Mitchell, aye.
Mignani, aye?
Greaves, aye.
Share aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Take a 10-minute
Thank you, Michael.
recess.
Take a
and then-
10-minute recess and we'll go into...